Is your spouse a landlord? Are you involved? If not, how would you feel if one day you had to take over 100% of those responsibilities? Look, the reality is some people are built for the landlord life and others are not. If your spouse is a landlord and you do not want to take over those responsibilities, you may want to start considering your exit options now. In today's episode, I'm going to break down landlord exit strategies so you don't get stuck with your spouse's career. So, welcome to my show, Growing Her Wealth, the show that gives women like you the straight talk and honest answers you need to sustain yourself and your wealth throughout your life. I'm your host, Danielle Meister, a wealth advisor with Madrona Financial and CPAs. I'm going to take you full spectrum wealth, tax, real estate planning, taxes, retirement, and beyond. Okay, so if you've gotten into the landlord business yourself, or your spouse is the primary point or CEO of that rental business, you've probably wondered what's going to happen if something happens to them because managing tenants, toilets, and trash does not pause for illness, retirement, or loss. So let me give you an example here because my husband is in the landlord business. We own a small real estate company and he has everything set up on autopilot for him. We manage the properties out of state and we have a handyman, we've got a cleaning crew, and everything is set up, but I don't run any of that. So, quite frankly, I'm in the same shoes as you guys. And we think about, we've got a game plan for what would we do if something were to happen. Well, now I'm 42, and so we're not really talking about retiring from the landlord business today or tomorrow. So we're not looking we're not in the exact same shoes as people who are say 50, 60, 70 and really trying to retire. We're still in the growth phase of our life. I want you to think for a sec, am I in the growth phase of my life or am I ready to retire? And do I want to start traveling or spending more time with family and friends? Because if landlords could easily sell their investment real estate without a massive tax bill, and they were able to preserve their legacy to the next generation, nearly everyone would just sell and retire. Instead, what people do is they end up holding on to this appreciated property that they have for like 50 years, literally forever, just to preserve this tax deferral. What they're trying to do is create what's called a step up in basis that you receive only if you pass away. I know it sounds kind of morbid, but what happens with a step up is if you bought a property for, say, $100,000 and you sold that property for $1 million, you would owe Uncle Sam taxes on the $900,000 gain. And if you had depreciated that property, you probably depreciated it down to zero, which means you owe taxes on $1 million gain. And if it's up to 30%, we're talking $300,000 in taxes. So it makes a lot of sense when somebody says, I don't want to sell my properties because I don't want to pay $300,000 in taxes. And so this is where this landlord exit strategy comes in. I'm telling you, you don't have to landlord until you die. You can sell highly appreciated investment property and you can move into passive real estate and still reap all the benefits of your active properties. Okay, let me tell you a little bit more what I mean because you're probably wondering what in the world is she talking about? So, if I told you this landlording to death strategy is not the only way, that you can simplify and you can have more of this traditional retirement and you don't have to give up the benefits. So I'm going to walk you through it. I want to keep it really simple because it actually can be quite simple once you understand how it works. Okay. So rather than running the risk of inheriting your spouse's career, what I want you to learn about is it's called this Delaware Statutory Trust. And it's a really great solution to retire from the landlord business. Step number one is I want you to pick your dog. Okay, that might sound a little bit funny, but pick the one investment real estate property that you cannot stand. Okay, everybody's got one. We have one. There's a dog in our portfolio. It's the one that always needs a new hot water heater. You need to repair the roof. Maybe it has termites. Maybe it consistently has bad renters. Maybe it's in a neighborhood and this is what we're coming up against. Maybe it's in a neighborhood that is getting a little dodgy, or like in Tacoma, Washington, there's some real estate landlord rules that are making it trickier to become and stay in the landlord business. And so that one dog is maybe the one investment property that you just consistently roll your eyes over. I've got a client here in Utah that owns about $9 million in real estate investment properties. And we were talking about picking the one dog to just get started. And the husband and wife looked at each other and they literally knew immediately which property they both just couldn't stand. And he's like, I know exactly which one we want to get started with, but I want to get my toes wet and I want to dip my feet with this one property to just get started. Okay, so step number 2 is you are going to just go to your realtor, your agent, the realtor that you typically work with, and you say, I want to sell a property, just like you would sell any other property. And they're going to draw up the paperwork. And you need to make sure in the selling agreement that it says, I am indicating the sale of this property and I'm going to earmark it for 1031 exchange. Now, I want to add a little caveat here that just because you indicate that you'd like to 1031 exchange this property, it does not mean that you have to. Okay, so you're not going to get stuck needing to 1031 exchange if you end up changing your mind. But if you go the opposite direction and you don't put that language into your selling agreement and you change your mind and you want to 1031 exchange it later, well, so sad, too bad, you can't. So just get that language in there, almost like boilerplate it every time you go to sell a property, because it just gives you the optionality. Okay, so you're going to go to your realtor, and you're going to say, I want to sell this property. And you're going to list it just as you would, and you're going to sell. It doesn't matter who you sell to. Okay, so there's no trick here. You're just going to sell it, list it for 1031 exchange. Now, at the end of that, instead of cutting the check to, like, let's just say that the sale goes through, the buyer buys, and the money comes in. We need to make sure that that money is never going into your possession. And what I mean is you cannot let that money land in your bank account or the whole thing is blown. And this is where a company like ours, so Madrona, my company, is a CPA firm. And so we know dang well how to get a 1031 exchange right and not blow this thing. You need to make sure that that money lands with a qualified intermediary. Okay, so that's just a fancy term for a third-party company that takes possession of the money while you're in between the properties. And step number 3 is where we are actively going to exit. We are going to exit the landlording business by getting out of active and into passive. So getting into passive is where the DST comes in. And the DST is a structure that allows another company to manage the property for you. Okay, before I get more into DSTs, I want to tell you about my Alaska client, and we're going to keep names and all information out of it, but I've got a client in Alaska, and they've been in the landlord business since, gosh, as long as, they can remember. I think the 80s, 90s is when they got into the business. And all of their properties were purchased for near nothing, like next to the pennies on the dollar, right? So, and they've fully depreciated these properties. It's apartment complexes, duplexes, triplexes, and they wanted to retire. And they're sick of dealing with these properties. There's deferred maintenance. And the one big one that, just always made me chuckle a little bit is the thorn was plowing the driveways. And when actually the DST concept was introduced by a CPA that is a fan of my boss. So Brian Evans, who runs our company, we do speaking events around the country on what DSTs are, because we're so proficient in this space. And so I believe the CPA had attended one of Brian's events, and the CPA that this Alaska client deals with told them about this idea, how to retire. And so they came to us and said, right, we're ready to do this. So in the spring of this year, 2025, we got the phone call. They've got I believe it's 13 properties total that needed to be sold, and they wanted all 13 sold between the spring of 2025 and the fall of 2025. And we are down to the last few properties that need to be sold. We've got two left, and we have done a 1031 exchange into a Delaware Statutory Trust, and they are about ready to retire before the winter. So not one driveway needs to be plowed, not one more, fixing a roof or repairing a crack in a pipe when it freezes, especially in Alaska, nothing. So, how in the world did they actually make this happen? I want to explain how this DST works. A DST is just think of it like a special tax container. What you do is you take a property that you own, like a rental property, a commercial building, and the DST is just it's a special tax container. The IRS code designated DST to a property that has this special tax wrapper. And that the property that is in the DST can be anything from an Amazon shipping facility to a tractor supply. It could be a life sciences piece of property. It could be a student housing facility. Another one that we've done a lot of over the last few years is getting into the storage space. And of course, there's apartment complexes. So the list goes on and on. A like kind exchange can be rental property or commercial property into anything else that's investment real estate. So it could be any of these different property types. And what happens is the DST is managed by a professional real estate company. And so when I say they're managing it, they're going to take care of the management of the property, the collection of rents. They're going to take care of any of the tax reporting. So it all gets reported on a simplified K-1. So that piece ends up being easy from one year to the next. Now, I'll tell you, it's a little tricky the first year that you have to set up the DST on your tax return. So I want to make sure you guys know that you want to be working with a company like a CPA that's pretty good with real estate and knows how to set up a depreciation schedule. If your CPA doesn't know how to do that, just give me a call, let me know, and we can either walk them through it or we can help you with it and do the tax reporting for you that year. So anyways, you're going to buy in to this DST as a fractional owner. And fractional ownership is different than a TIC. So once upon a time, people would 1031 exchange into what's called a TIC or a TIC, tenants in common. This is not a TIC. It's not the same thing. Okay. So anybody who has that in their mind, anybody who doesn't know what that is, don't worry about it because we're not using it. Now, I want to get into the last piece here, which is the benefits of this 1031 exchange into the passive Delaware Statutory Trust, because there are 5 benefits. So 5. One is you're immediately deferring up to 30% in taxes. And if you continue deferring forever for the rest of your life, maybe you're 50 or 60 or even 70 today, you're retiring, you're deferring the tax. If you keep doing a 1031 exchange to DST and you do that for the rest of your life, you eventually pass away and you completely eliminate that 30% tax forever, and your beneficiaries inherit the DST tax-free. Okay. The second one is we're going to keep receiving monthly income checks. You're going to keep getting paid. And a lot of times it's paying more than the active property. If you had a rental and maybe you were collecting a certain percent or a certain amount after you account for expenses throughout the year, and I can do an analysis for clients. Essentially, you go to your Schedule E and it tells you exactly what, at the end of the day, what you were earning. And we can do a direct comparison to see how much income would a DST be paying you for doing absolutely nothing. Okay. Now, number 3 is you're still participating in the growth of the underlying real estate. After all, you're a fractional owner in this real estate. So if the real estate goes up, or honestly, if it goes down, you're an owner. So you will go up or down. And of course, over the long term, real estate's been a really good wealth generating tool. So in our portfolio over time, we want this to be both a growth tool, right? Growth tool and an income tool. Okay, so we talked about 5 things. That was number 3. Number 4 for the benefits is that it can create this tax-free legacy. So I talked about this a little bit in number 2, but a tax-free legacy. So the technical term for this is a step up in basis. You are leaving this asset to your beneficiaries tax-free, which is amazing. If we go back to that original example that I gave, if your fully depreciated real estate is basis of next to zero, selling at $1 million. And let's say that you do DSTs and it grows to maybe 1.5 million. I'm just making up numbers. But now you've got a $1.5 million gain. All of that at death steps up, meaning the cost basis of zero goes to a cost basis of 1.5 million, and the gain is completely wiped out. And the last, number 5 benefit is you have absolutely zero stress of property management. You have no maintenance calls, you have no tenant calls, no toilets, trash, none of it. It's a way for you to retire with zero stress of property management. You guys, those are the steps. We're reducing your landlord responsibilities without giving up any of the benefits of being a landlord. And you don't run the risk, right? We talked at the beginning, if your spouse runs the landlord business, you do not run the risk of inheriting your spouse's career if you have done a 1031 exchange into a DST. Okay, guys, I want you to remember that this show should not be considered financial advice. To qualify for a DST, you must be an accredited investor. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep building your wealth.